Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for your valuable testimony here today. I also want to thank Speaker McCarthy for creating this committee, and it's frankly long overdue that we put together a committee like this and that it's bipartisan. The CCP fears more than ever as Republicans and Democrats working together to expose the malign activities of the CCP. And what I love about our committee is it's members that are serious, substantive, and conscientious members. I want to make 2 points and then ask a question. One is, over the last 2 years, I've been fortunate enough to serve on the Intelligence Committee. And it's become more clear to me than ever that China has a plan to replace the United States. And they're working at it every day. Replace our economy, replace us in technology, replace us when it comes to national security and the military, and diplomatically. Number 2, Mr. Paul, I'm glad you talked about the history of China being led into the global economy. I look back at when we let China into the WTO, and I don't think any of us were in Congress at the time when that happened, but the argument was, bring them into the WTO, they're going to westernize, they're going to reform, they're going to liberalize their ways. And here we are 20 years later, and there's some spotty things that we can find, but I would argue they've really taken advantage, manipulated the World Trade Organization and many of our global economic systems that we have in place. And, you know, we hear a lot from people in DC, particularly in the business community. Well, we need engagement. We need diplomacy, people that apologize for the CCP. But I look at, and it's been alluded to here today, just in the last 4 years here, we've heard about, obviously, in Ukraine, China siding with Putin on an unprovoked illegal invasion, right? They talked about an unbreakable bond with Putin. The COVID outbreak. Originally, what did the CCP do? They blamed it on the U.S. Army, right? You look at their deceitfulness when it related to the World Health Organization. You couple that with the wolf warrior mentality and diplomacy that's been put forth across the globe. Democracy doesn't work anymore. That's what she tells people around the globe. It was alluded to by my colleague, Mr. Mollenauer, the fentanyl, a staggering 110,000 deaths last year in the United States. 99% of the fentanyl is coming from precursor drugs from China. We have consistently, over the last 4 years, asked China to do something. They've done nothing. Just yesterday was announced, China in 2022 issued 2 new coal-powered plant permits per week. 104 new coal-powered power plants in there. So they talk about doing stuff on the environment. So I mention all that in those 2 points. Now to my question. Mr. Pottinger, we hear often from Wall Street and corporations and global businesses that are many of our friends that you need to continue to engage. You got to turn the other cheek. We hear, well, China's not North Korea. In the business community and how we deal with them in terms of, you know, their argument, China's going to change. I would just be curious, the video you played was very powerful. What would be your advice as we engage with corporate America that really doesn't like what we're doing up here and is scared and worried?
General McMaster has a phrase, first do no harm, which I could allow him to talk about a little bit. But look, we want to keep channels open with Beijing, particularly high-level channels. One of the reasons we want to do that is that we want to prevent Xi Jinping from making a grave miscalculation. Miscalculations are the things that dictators do, especially when they've been in power for a long time. But we shouldn't kid ourselves, our corporations, well-meaning protesters, whoever it is, we should not joke to ourselves that Beijing has any interest in collaborating with the United States or others in trying to prevent and mitigate serious problems in the world, whether it's drug abuse, whether it's proliferation of weapons, pollution of our oceans, if it's our atmosphere is getting hotter, or pandemics. Usually when you actually take the time to study the causes of these problems, the CCP is usually one of the primary contributors to those problems. It is very rarely, in any kind of a honest way, trying to mitigate against those problems.
General McMaster, if you could reply.
Congressman, thank you. I think that you hit the nail on the head in terms of the false promises of liberalization or cooperation. And what I wrote in the statement for the record is that we do have to take almost a Hippocratic oath. And this isn't just the work of this committee. This is the work in corporate boardrooms to first do no hurt or harm in 3 areas. Don't give the CCP invest in companies that will give them a differential advantage over us militarily. The second is don't compromise the long-term viability of your business and your workers' jobs in exchange for short-term profits. And the third, immensely important, I think, is don't help them perfect their technologically enabled Orwellian police state or commit genocide. I think, as we saw with Russia's reinvasion, the private sector took measures that went beyond what we had done in terms of sanctions on Vladimir Putin and on Russia. I believe that genocide, for example, should be an ESG issue in boardroom discussions across the country.
Thank you.